Glad to have you on for Reporting Without a Headache, the playbook on financial reporting. We're going to talk all things SF 425 this afternoon. Super excited about that. It might be the first time somebody's ever said super excited to talk about the SF 425, but we are. That's what we're doing. So a little bit about us. If you are new here, a couple of you all are new. This is a program of Team DWC Inside Grants, and we started in 2020, right during the middle of COVID. And the goal was to help organizations, nonprofits, folks receiving federal grants, how to navigate the federal grant landscape, and to really help them understand compliance and not make it so difficult. And we are led. I'm a former Fed. I'm also before I was a federal employee, I was a grantee and led a agency that got federal funding. The majority of our staff are people who led and did grants management at the federal level. With all the reductions in force that have happened, I've just been gobbling people up, and all these amazing feds. Just putting them on our team. And the idea was to really just support grantees and giving kind of that inside knowledge for you so you can be super successful in your grants management. Since we started, we have partnered with 231 nonprofit organizations and connected with 147 federal agencies. So those could be operating divisions of a larger, federal agency. We also have trained 15,000 unique individuals, and that was through 850 separate and unique training sessions. So, saying all that, we've also supported states in the management of $10 billion in funding. And so that has in making sure that they were good in compliant with all the regs as well. Now, enough about Team DWC and where we've been. I'm really excited to talk to you about who we have presenting today because they are super knowledgeable about the SF 425. And one of those things that I wish I had when I was a grantee, first off, is Dr. Corinna Stiles. She's a senior consultant here at Team DWC. She hired me in federal government. She was also my program officer. I won't tell you all the yelling that she did at me when I was a grantee because I was so bad. But she is an amazing human, knows her stuff, been around vocational rehabilitation, the Department of Education. She's been there most recently at HUD. If you are a Center for Independent Living, you probably recognize Corinna as she was the director of the Office of Independent Living Programs at ACL. And so glad to have her on our team. Always good to have Corinna around. Aaron Taylor, if you are ACL person, you are probably pretty familiar with Aaron. He most recently was a supervisory grants manager at HHS. So all the SF 425s came across his desk. And his staff and his colleagues, they saw all of them. So literally, probably two of the best people to talk about this are going to be talking about the SF 425 and kind of the systems you need in place to stay compliant. Aaron has 14 years of federal grant management experience and was also the former audit liaison for the HUD Office of Community Planning and Development. That's enough talking for me today. So Aaron, it's all yours, my friend.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Dave. And maybe I'll just define what an audit liaison officer is. So that's the go-between person for audit inspector general audits and GAO audits to provide support to the grantee and to work on the federal agency's position so that you can resolve audit findings. So when I was at HUD, I worked on over 100 OIG audits and 700 recommendations with about $5 billion in question cost. So if you hear the term OIG or GAO and you get fear in your brain, love to help you with that and hear along, and something that I really enjoyed doing. So today for federal financial reports, We are not going to walk through every single field step by step. If that's something you as an organization need right now, or you as an individual or financial manager or executive director, we're happy to work with you. Reach out to us and we can do a step-by-step walkthrough and go through all your different funding streams and tell you how they fit into the right boxes. But what we will do for you today is go through the background. Why do we have to do financial reporting? Go through the key fields and the sections and how the data blends together. We'll give you guidance on how to prepare for completing that FFR. Shocker, it doesn't start on September 30th, right? This is a process that goes deep into your organization. It's part of your accounting system, your internal controls, and your policy. And it's something that's constantly living and moving, and you're revising. And Corinna and I are both experienced feds with over a decade of experience, and we can give you that insider edge to how feds use financial reporting data and how they apply it to assessing whether you're achieving the award goals or whether you are a risk and someone that needs to be reviewed further. So financial reporting comes right from the uniform guidance. A few weeks ago, we had a webinar that went through the transition to 2 CFR 200. And if you're an HHS grantee, this should be right at the forefront for you right now. Because on October 1st, you transition from uniform guidance at 45 CFR 75 to uniform guidance at 2 CFR 200. If that's something that you're not thinking about right now relative to your policies and systems, it is something you need to be mindful of and aware of any changes that have happened in the last 12 months. Particularly in subpart 328, it establishes that financial reporting has to be done at least annually, and the submission timeframes, whether it's quarterly or final or annual, are going to vary based on the type of the report. Next comes the program statute. So your statute associated with your program, it is likely going to provide additional conditions for financial reporting, how you need to do it, and what needs to be included. And it might also identify the frequency as well, quarterly, semi-annually, or annual. Where that all gets blended together is in the notice of award. Your notice of award should identify what the applicable regulations are, including the uniform guidance and any program regs, plus the statutory requirements. These will clarify what you have to report on, what you use, likely the 425, when you have to do it, how frequently you have to do it, and in what system you will do it in, either in grant solutions or payment management system, or whatever the applicable grant oversight or banking system is for the agency that you're working with. Likely, if you have funds from multiple different streams, multiple different agencies, you're going to have different systems, and your policies and approaches need to reflect that reporting is done in multiple places. Now, as Dave said, usually when we talk about financial reporting and the 425, or I like to call it the FFR, it doesn't get many people too excited. So I like to joke and say that this is the most boring slide of the presentation because more than half of the screen is taken up by the federal financial reporting field or form. It's got 14 fields, obviously infinite possibilities because all sorts of numbers and combinations. And for those that really, really love numbers, endless fun, right? Because it dials back into all the different spreadsheets and forms and accounting documents that you have in-house that combine to make the few amount of numbers that you put into this form. When I worked with grantees, what they often didn't see was that your financial report tells a story. Some examples could be that you're using money at a rate that's similar to your period of performance and you're effectively moving forward. Maybe you have a lot of unobligated funds, or you are drawing down money faster than you're expending it. And those represent risk or obstacles or issues that the federal government might want to follow up further on. If you have to report on match or program income, are you doing that correctly? Are you showing progress? Are you applying the right standards? Those are all risk and red flags that a Fed employee would look out for. And when you have issues or mistakes in those areas, you're telling a story that you're not a good steward right now. And the story you want to be telling is, I am a great steward and I'm doing an awesome job on this award. So how do Feds actually use the Federal Financial Report? I've had the opportunity to work in 5 different federal departments. Most of my time was at HUD, but most recently I spent about 3 years at HHS in the Administration for Community Living. There, simply, we would use federal financial reports to gauge your progress. Are you using funds? Are you using it timely? Does it seem like the award is progressing and moving forward from a financial standpoint? And the most common factor there is, are funds going out the door? Are funds being expended? We're also going to look at compliance with statutory requirements. Some of the key ones that I had to deal with different programs at HHS were obligation requirements, match or cost share requirements, and specific program income requirements. All of these items are covered in your notice of award, and you need to make sure that you have controls and staffing in place that are knowledgeable on these requirements so that you can successfully report and show that you're succeeding. We use federal financial reports as one of the markers or legs for closeout, and particularly with the shift to 2 CFR 200 and the recent updates to the uniform guidance, if you're delinquent on submitting final federal financial reports or final FFRs, you're putting yourself at risk for being publicly documented for non-compliance, particularly if you're a year late, because federal agencies now have a mandate to close all awards within 1 year of their award end date. And lastly, we use federal employees use federal financial reports to identify risk factors. One of the common ways I used it at ACL was to go through the different types of program codes and identify what the financial requirements were for that program or program code. And then I would build spec sheets for my team and say, you have to track these key fields for this program. If there's mistakes there, we need to flag it and put it aside and decide if further follow-up is needed. And that might be a simple question. It might be the indicator that leads to an audit or a monitoring, and that digs down further. And what I commonly found with FFR mistakes is that it was a crack that broke into a much bigger issue. So if you are showing negative signs or negative trends in your federal financial report, it's likely that the federal government is going to pick up on it over time. And when they do reviews, there's a good chance it's because of underlying factors like internal controls or outdated policy or poor oversight that's resulting in that. So it's a multi-factor fix. So we're going to spend a little time going through each part of the federal financial report form. We're not going to go field by field, so I won't say in field 1 do this, field 2 do this, but we're going to talk about in logical groups. So the first 9 boxes are generally the data that you don't think about because it's auto-populated by the federal agency or the system that you're working in. It's your organization, your address, your grant number, or it's things like the type of report you're doing and the report date, the performance periods. What I can share with you as my experience as a Fed is that it's not uncommon for there to be mistakes in these boxes. And it is on you as the grantee to identify if there is mistakes. Go to your notice of award, look at the terms and conditions, look at what's required of you. If the report says it's semi-annual when it should be an annual, or it says final when it should be an annual, let the Fed contact know, let them know there's an error. Don't proceed with submitting a report if there's bad information in these boxes. And that's something I'll emphasize again and why we put on the screen in a box before you certify or before you submit. These are key things that are within your control that you need to check, because if you submit a report that's got inaccurate information to the federal government, then there's concern they'll identify that as negligence as opposed to just accidental or a mistake. So now we shift down to box 10, and we've both broken box 10 into two parts. The first part are fields A through H. These focus on how you use an award. Particularly, we're going to call out a few boxes. So when I was at HHS, we used the payment management system, and they had a new policy that went in place that it would autofill your federal financial report form for 10A and 10B based on the draws that you'd made as of the end of the reporting period. If this was a final FFR, you would expect those to be the same because your draws and expenditures should all match by that point and reconcile. But if this was an interim, say an annual FFR or semi-annual FFR, then you might have variations, and you need to be aware of how the fields are interconnected with each other. So if you're doing reimbursement and cash-based accounting, I would expect field 10B and 10E to match up. If I was seeing inconsistencies as a Fed, that might be a flag that I want to follow up. Some other flags would be boxes 10G and 10H. So your obligations and the funds that you're leaving unobligated, because if you have a lot of funds that have not been obligated and time is elapsing in the award, then that's a risk that the project won't move forward and the objectives of the award won't be achieved. So pay close attention to these fields, how they're connected based on the type of accounting that you're doing and the program requirements, because they might not be telling the story that you think. Also, you want your financial data to match up with the story you're telling from a performance or mission standpoint in your program performance report. Fed staff would commonly look to see how this blends. And if those stories are inconsistent, it's going to open questions of, wow, they've been spending a lot of money and it seems like they're on progress, but they haven't really connected with many consumers, or they haven't achieved the outputs we expected. And those inconsistencies, again, lead to the potential of greater review and oversight. And I'll tell you, that's something that you want to avoid, because it was very rare that I would do a monitoring or audit review and come away with a clean setup. Now let's shift to the backside of box 10. This is where we talk about cost share, but we probably most commonly know it as match. And we also talk about program income. So match has three fields. You identify what's required and you identify what your progress is towards achieving that requirement. For program income, we need to think about first deductive or alternative method. Ideally, there will be a program guidance or your notice of award will say the agency wants you to do this way, right? Additive means you add it to the award and you get more money. Deductive means you take it away from the award and you get less money. It's really important to know what the expected method is. If these are terms that you've never heard before or never understood, this is something we'd love to work with you on and would encourage you to reach out. If you are making issues with match and program income, and this is a requirement for the program, this is a big red flag. If you're not making progress towards match and time's elapsing in the award, and it looks like you're burning through award funds, again, a big red flag. So be really knowledgeable of what's required for you for each award and create a plan at the beginning that puts you on a path for success. All right, now we're shifting into no man's land, or the place that people are least excited to go. I spent a lot of time in the last year of my federal service working with grantees on indirect cost, because based on the reporting I saw on a sample of 300 nonprofits, there was a lot of inconsistency. There appeared to be a lot of confusion, and there were some common mistakes. The biggest thing I would share with grantees is that if you don't have a record of charging indirect cost to an award, don't put anything in box 11. And more importantly, follow up with a note in box 12, the comments, to say, we didn't charge indirect cost to this award. If you're using a negotiated rate, make sure that you have an assigned agreement or approved agreement to back up that rate and the dates in your application of it. Make sure that the way you're doing the base and calculating it aligns with your negotiated agreement. If you're using the de minimis, know that the base has to be the modified total direct cost. This is a term that comes directly from the uniform guidance. And a common mistake I saw with grantees is that they would put their award amount into field 11D, the base, as opposed to the modified total direct cost. And this is a huge concern. When you put your award amount in there, you're telling us that you had nothing but direct cost for expenditures. And that's not true if you're trying to charge indirect cost, right? So your indirect cost for de minimis is based on the modified total direct cost. One last thing to point out is that some programs have administrative caps or indirect cost caps that might be lower than the indirect cost rate that you normally charge. So again, you need to be really mindful of your notice of award and any statutory requirements that go along with the program. So you're ahead of the game and don't miss out if there's a cap that would require you to take a lower indirect cost kickback or lower indirect cost amount than what you would normally charge. So then the last part of the form and the final steps go into boxes 12 through 14. So again, like 1 through 9, these are fields that the grantees don't often pay attention to, but particularly box 12, I'll encourage you, is really important. If you have issues within your data, you have a lot of unobligated funds, you're failing to meet match, maybe you drew down funds and weren't able to have expenditures as fast as you expected to, so your advance, you didn't do a timely advance, then tell the story here in box 12. Write a narrative to explain the anomalies in the data and get ahead of the issues. Ideally, you're already having a conversation with your program officer or grants manager before this, but don't lose this opportunity to back up and tell the story of your financial data. This is a free field to enter narrative. And I would also encourage you that if you use this narrative and explain these obstacles in your program performance report, make sure that the story is consistent and that it matches up. Because again, inconsistencies are going to be the quickest thing that brings more expansive, right? Extensive federal review down on your organization. And the last thing I'll note is that, get your management and get your board involved and make sure when you're submitting any financial report that you go through the normal processes for your organization, normal internal controls and checks and balances to ensure that the report's accurate, because you want it to be right the first time. Now I'm going to trade it off to my awesome colleague, Corinna, and she's going to lead you through some important pre-gaming facts.
Thanks, Aaron. And hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for the Playbook on Financial Management today. It's great to be here talking about one of the most important and often misunderstood parts of grant management, the FFR. Aaron has provided you a great overview on the importance of thoughtful, accurate data on the FFR. However, the work of the FFR begins way before you open the FFR to complete it. Before FFR game day, you've got to have your team trained, your playbook ready, and your strategy clear. That's what FFR pre-gaming is all about. So let's break it down. There are 4 key players on your FFR team: policies and procedures, internal controls, accounting systems, and maybe most important, your people. We're going to start with policies and procedures. Strong written policies and procedures set the framework for strong financial management and successful reporting throughout the grant life cycle. If your policies and procedures aren't written and followed, your FFR will eventually tell on you. Next slide, please. What I have found after years of working with nonprofits and other grantees is the passion to provide services often overrides the in-house need for strong financial management and accurate reporting. I once worked with a nonprofit that had brilliant service delivery but couldn't locate its cost allocation plan. So guess what? The FFR told that story for them and not in a good way. I can tell you, and I agree with Aaron, when you submit a poorly written FFR, it's a red flag that can lead to additional review and scrutiny by your funder. And if a formal review is triggered, your written policies and procedures will be requested and reviewed with a fine-tooth comb. So why do I keep emphasizing written when I talk about policies and procedures? Because just saying, oh, we all just know what to do isn't good enough. And trust me, we have lived this scenario. The goal, of course, is to submit a strong FFR that raises no flags. So what's the play? Well, I'm going to give you a few considerations. Policies and procedures should clearly identify who has financial responsibilities and what they are. Every revenue source should be independently identifiable with the applicable laws, regulations, and rules for each revenue source. The framework should clearly lay out financial reporting requirements, including system logistics and frequency of reporting. Strong policies and procedures should also clearly identify funding streams and funding nuances such as cost allocation and indirect cost methods. And as a side note, it's not only important to have written policies and procedures, but it's also critical that everyone who touches a funding stream is aware of the policies and procedures. So ongoing training to staff and your board of directors is always highly recommended. And you may be thinking, Corinna, our policies and procedures are excellent because you gave us the guidance while you were at ACL. And I appreciate that feedback. But here's a question. How many of you have updated your policies and procedures in the last 12 months? Well, if you are an ACL grantee, there were significant changes to 2 CFR 200 that apply to your funding that became effective October 1 of 2025. If you haven't updated your policies and procedures to reflect these changes, I can tell you you are at risk. I agree with Aaron that once a compliance review is initiated, it's rare to not have even a single finding. And often this ends up being for something you always meant to get to, you always meant to update, you always meant to discuss with your board, but didn't. So a little known fact, I'm a huge UFC fan, and fighters are told, finish it in the ring. Don't let the outcome go to a judge's decision because you likely won't agree with the decision. In this scenario, strong policies and procedures will lead to a strong FFR, and you minimize the chance for a review and the success of your agency going to decision. So let's shift to internal controls. Internal controls, as reflected in your written policies and procedures, ensure that grant funds are properly managed and processes comply with the award requirements. If your internal controls are weak, the decision will go to the judges and the funder's decision might not go your way. Strong internal controls ensure checks and balances throughout your fiscal management. They ensure compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and rules. They strengthen data integrity, thereby improving reporting accuracy. And very important, strong internal controls are your line of defense against fraud, waste, and abuse. If you are ever reviewed by a funder, they will undoubtedly look for not only written policies and procedures that speak to internal controls, but they will also interview staff and members of your board to determine their level of knowledge related to the organization's internal controls and how well they are operationalized. You want to have everyone saying the same thing, have the same level of understanding that aligns with your written policies and procedures. I also want to mention internal controls is not just a recommendation from Team DWC, it's a requirement. Let me read for you just a really short snippet from 2 CFR 200.303, which says, in part, the non-federal entity must establish and maintain effective internal control over the federal award that provides reasonable assurance that the non-federal entity is managing the federal award in compliance with federal statutes, regulations, and the terms and conditions of the federal award. So how is reasonable assurance defined? My lawyerly response says it depends. My advice is finish it in the ring and don't let it go to a decision. Because strong internal controls aren't about bureaucracy, they're your agency's defense strategy. They protect your mission and your reputation. So let's move on to accounting systems. Accounting systems house your financial data, and their design is critical for accurate reporting. Your accounting system should clearly show award funds are being tracked separately and accurately. Here's a myth. You need a separate bank account for every funding stream. No. In fact, every fraud case I investigated as a federal officer had a couple of things in common. One, too many accounts and not enough oversight. Your accounting system is basically your scoreboard. It doesn't just track the points, it tells the story of how your team played. A strong accounting system will streamline award budgeting, tracking, and financial reporting. It will properly identify and classify expenditures across funding streams. And very important, it will allow for seamless FFR reporting. And bonus round, it will support your return on investment story. Going back to Aaron's earlier slide that identified the FFR as what's the story you want it to tell? The story is the return on investment. Without a strong accounting system, your story could be told in a public-facing compliance review document. And that's not where you want that to be. But when your system works well, your FFR almost completes itself, and your return on investment story practically writes itself. Lastly, let me touch on management and staffing. Even the best playbook fails without the right team on the field. Management and staff have to live your financial policies, not just sign off on them. The success of your organization is more likely when staff management of award funds are in line with your organization's own policies and internal controls. This can be called into question when submitted a poorly written FFR. And if you're a manager or director out there listening in on the presentation today, your job isn't just to approve the FFR, it's to create a culture where compliance and transparency are the norm. So remember, following the Team DWC playbook for financial reporting includes pre-gaming way ahead of when the FFR is due. So don't wait for game day to prepare. Train early, review often, and keep your team ready. Because when it comes to financial reporting, you never want the decision in someone else's hands. Finish it in the ring. Solid pre-gaming will ensure you control the decision. And with that, I'll turn it back to the DWC coach, Dave Wickstrom.
Hey, thanks, Corinna. Thank you, Aaron. Great. Hopefully that has been helpful to you. Corinna and Aaron both touched on if you need help, we are here. Team DWC, we can definitely support you in a few different options. If it's looking at your SOPs, right? If you're a HHS grantee, your SOPs need to be updated yesterday, right? As of October 1, a whole different world with 2 CFR 200 has come into existence for you. So make sure you have those updated. We are more than capable of and have the capacity to support you in that and taking that burden off of you and getting those in compliance. We can also do trainings on the new SOPs on a different subject, making sure that you're audit ready, or maybe you had a single audit and you had some question costs. The auditor said you had some question costs and you don't believe that. And we can work with you to kind of see, hey, is this something worth fighting? And or is it, hey, yeah, this question cost should be disallowed, and we'll work out a plan to get that straight with the federal government with you. Also, we can just be in the background with ongoing technical assistance as you need things. We have grantees all the time just emailing us questions, kind of like a retainer almost, where they're just hourly kind of rate with us, where we're just working with them. Any and everything federal grant related. So definitely something, all sorts of different things we can support you with. Now, in the chat, we are going to have a question. So if you have any questions, throw those in the chat. We are here to answer your questions if you have any. This is your time. Also, just to let you know, a couple cool presentations coming up that we are super excited about. The one October 22nd is going to be with Christine Phillips. She is the former Director of External Affairs at ACL. External Affairs is kind of all comms that came out of ACL. She's going to be kind of talking about how do you communicate the impact of your work in this day and age? What does that look like? And give you some strategies to help you communicate that. What are we looking at as feds when you're communicating, and what do they want to know as well? November 19th is one I'm super stoked about. Dr. Corinna Stiles will be back with Dr. Scott Moore. If you were here on the first one, he presented with me. They're going to be talking about compensation strategies, and specifically kind of how do you pay incentive pay, right? Or bonuses with federal funds. Is that allowable? What does that look like? What do your policies need to look like? How do you set salaries? All these different things that you might have questions about around incentive pay or just any type of compensation with federal grants. That will be on November 19th. Both of these are always at the same time, 12:30 Eastern time, and again, the same day at 12:30 Pacific time. There's going to be another one on the compensation in December as well. And then hopefully in 2026, you'll start seeing some real live day-long, 2-day-long trainings that we're going to start doing on different subjects to really help you get into the weeds at your agency. So back to questions. Anybody have any questions for Corinna or Aaron? By the way, if you want to work with us or have questions, maybe you're not comfortable sharing, just make sure you go to our website, Team DWC, hit work with us, and fill out that small form there, and we will get right back to you. You can also just email insidegrants@teamdwc.com, and we will, somebody from our team will reply to you. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Great. So Billy shared a question just to me in chat, and it was about a discretionary award, so a 90 award at ACL that was not showing up in PMF for an FFR report. He's been drawing down against this award, but he doesn't see the report up yet. One thing I'll share from my time at ACL is that there was a lot of FFR production errors in the PMS system. When I first came to ACL, there was about 7,000 reports we had to track for that fiscal year, and 50% had errors. And that could be not existent, the wrong report type, the wrong report date. My guess is that right now, with the shift to ACF for grants management responsibility and the issues that I know exist with grant solutions, that this is likely a missed report because someone hasn't picked it up on a quality control. So as a Fed, I would run quality control in the first 2 weeks of October. And with the shutdown, there's nobody there to run QC right now. So I think this is likely going to be as soon as shutdown comes, give a heads up. And my guess is you're not the only one in that program in that boat. If there's anything else I can address for you, Billy, please let us know. I'm sorry I can't give you, a more specific answer, but I would say those factors are likely contributing.
Carl has a good question. Aaron, you want to take that or?
Yeah, so are they going to be due on the same schedule? My answer is likely, right? But the other thing, and Carl, if you are an ACL grantee, that you should note is that there was huge, staff turnover, right? You nailed it. Huge staff turnover and capacity. And I have no idea what the review process is going to be. I don't think it's likely the program offices are going to take this over. So it's going to be whatever the new process is for ACF. What is within your control is the terms and conditions in the notice of award. If the terms and conditions in your notice of award say they're due 90 days or due 120 days, then do everything in your ability to do that. What you can't solve is the question that Billy brought up, is the report doesn't exist in the system. If the report doesn't exist in the system, make your own report, and as soon as it comes available, be ready to fill in the fields.